Let's start with the big picture. Beginning on February 28, 2026, Israel and the United States engaged in coordinated joint attacks on various sites in Iran, starting a major conflict aimed at regime change. Codenamed Operation Roaring Lion by Israel and Operation Epic Fury by the United States. The attacks killed hundreds and targeted key Iranian officials, military commanders, and facilities. Let me repeat that Operation Epic Fury. That's the official name the Pentagon gave this mission. And honestly, the name alone tells you everything about the scale of what we're witnessing. The operation began with joint strikes by Israel and the U.S. in the cities of Tehran, Isfahan, Qom, Karaj, and Kermanshah. Now here's where things get absolutely jaw-dropping. The attacks included the assassination of Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, whose compound was destroyed, along with Ali Shamkhani, former head of Iran's Supreme National Security Council, and several other Iranian officials. On March 2, 2026, Khamenei's wife, Mansour Khajastabagrzadeh, was also confirmed to have died from injuries sustained in the strike. This is unprecedented, folks. Never before in modern history has a sitting supreme leader of Iran been assassinated by foreign military action. Around 2,000 strikes have been conducted by Israel and the U.S. as of March 1st. On March 2nd, the IAEA said that it had no indication that any of the nuclear installations had been hit or damaged in strikes. 2,000 strikes in just a few days. Let that sink in. Okay, so how do we get to this point? Because tensions between the U.S. and Iran didn't just appear overnight. This has been building for a very, very long time. Let me take you back through the timeline. On January 2nd, 2026, U.S. President Donald Trump threatened a lock and loaded military intervention in Iran if the government decided to kill peaceful protesters. On January 13th, he expressed support for Iranian anti-government protesters and pledged that help is on the way for them. Later, on January 23rd, Trump announced that a U.S. armada was heading to the Middle East, including the aircraft carrier USS Abraham Lincoln and several guided missile destroyers. But here's an interesting historical fact for you. These ongoing tensions escalated into direct conflict between the U.S. and Iran back in January 2020, when Donald Trump ordered the assassination of Qasem Soleimani. That was the first time many people realized that open warfare between these two nations was a real possibility. Now fast forward to 2026. The attacks came when the Iranian regime was arguably at its weakest point in years. There were extensive protests in Iran in early 2026, motivated by a weakened economy and struggling infrastructure, illustrating the regime's weakened legitimacy within the country. The protests were put down with extensive use of force. Some student protests had resumed in late February. On February 24, 2026, during a State of the Union speech, Trump accused Iran, which he called the world's #1 sponsor of terror, of reviving efforts to build nuclear weapons. He described Iran's ambitions as sinister and warned that Iran had also developed increasingly advanced missile capabilities that can threaten Europe and our bases overseas. He warned that the U.S. was prepared to act if necessary. And then diplomatic efforts collapsed. The strikes followed the failure of recent end. The diplomacy failed, and then the missiles started flying. Now let's talk about why the Trump administration says it launched this attack. And honestly, the messaging has been complicated. Trump and his proxies have not been aligned on their narrative, leading to confusion about how Trump and his advisors are defining the endgame for this escalating conflict. The stated justification since the attack began has whipsawed between preventing Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon, deposing the Iranian regime that brutally represses dissent, stopping an imminent attack from Iran on U.S. interests, and following Israel's lead. The muddied messaging underscores a broader question. Is Trump pursuing a single military objective or full-blown regime change? Here's what President Trump himself said. At exactly 2:30 a.m. Eastern Time on February 28th, U.S. President Donald Trump released an 8-minute video statement on Truth Social, saying that the purpose of the U.S. strikes in Iran was effectively regime change. Trump said that Iran's menacing activities endangered the U.S. and its allies. He cited the Iran hostage crisis, support for proxies such as Hamas and Hezbollah, its killings of protesters, and its alleged pursuit of nuclear weapons. Trump urged members of the IRGC to lay down your weapons and have complete immunity, or in the alternative, face certain death. Addressing the Iranian public, he said, "When we are finished, take over your government." Secretary of State Marco Rubio offered a slightly different explanation. Rubio suggested that Israel was planning an initial strike on Iran, and that the Trump administration then opted to launch its own preemptive attack in order to avoid further U.S. casualties. "We knew that there was going to be Israeli action. We knew that that would precipitate an attack against American forces, and we knew that if we didn't preemptively go after them before they launched those attacks, we would suffer higher casualties," Rubio said. But here's the critical fact check. The United Nations nuclear watchdog has countered these claims, telling CNN that Iran was not days or weeks away from having atomic weapons. Trump himself has repeatedly said that Tehran's nuclear program was obliterated by U.S. strikes on Iran last summer. And U.S. intelligence suggests Iran would need until 2035 to develop an intercontinental ballistic missile if it chose to pursue one. So we have conflicting narratives. The stated reasons keep shifting, and the intelligence doesn't necessarily support all the claims being made. Now let's talk about how Iran has responded, because they have not taken this lying down. Iran's response has been named Operation True Promise 4, the latest in a series of military actions called Operation True Promise. In retaliation, Iran launched dozens of its drones and ballistic missiles throughout the Persian Gulf at targets in Israel and U.S. military bases in Jordan, Kuwait, and Bahrain. The UAE's Ministry of Defense said in a post on X that the country's Air Force and air defense units had intercepted 165 ballistic missiles, 2 cruise missiles, and 541 Iranian drones since the start of the Iranian attack. Among the locations targeted were Dubai's iconic Burj Al Arab Hotel, the Fairmont Hotel on the Palm, Jebel Ali Port, Abu Dhabi's Etihad Towers, and the international airports in both Emirates. Think about that. Iran attacked landmarks in Dubai that people visit as tourists every single day. The U.S. Embassy headquarters in Riyadh was also hit by drone strikes. Iran hit back at industrial and diplomatic targets across the Middle East on March 3rd, with Washington warning its citizens to evacuate the entire region. Amazon's Bahrain data center was targeted by Iran for the company's support of U.S. military and intelligence activities. The company's cloud computing unit said one of its facilities in Bahrain was damaged by a nearby drone strike. 2 data centers in the United Arab Emirates were also damaged after they were directly struck by drones. All of the facilities remain offline, according to the Amazon Web Services Health Dashboard. This is modern warfare, folks. They're not just hitting military bases, they're hitting tech infrastructure. Let's talk about the human cost here, because this is the part that really matters. The latest Middle East conflict continues, spiraling days after Israel and the U.S. launched their joint operation on Iran, killing more than 1,000 people, triggering retaliatory strikes on Israel and neighboring Gulf states, and plunging the region into fear and uncertainty. Iran's Red Crescent Society said Tuesday at least 787 people have been killed in attacks on 153 cities across the country. 10 people have been killed in Israel since the start of the conflict, according to Israeli officials. 6 Americans have been killed in action and 18 service members have been injured as the U.S. continues its strikes on Iran and Iran counterattacks, sending missiles and drones at Israel and U.S. assets in the region. The Pentagon has provided the names of the 5th and 6th U.S. Army Reserve soldiers who were killed. Chief Warrant Officer 3 Robert Marzin, 54, of Sacramento, California, and Major Jeffrey R. O'Brien, 45, of Indianola, Iowa. O'Brien died on March 1st in Port Shuaibah, Kuwait, during an unmanned aircraft system attack. Real people, real families, real lives lost. Many of the reported civilian deaths in the Gulf states in this escalating conflict are South Asian nationals, highlighting the region's reliance on a migrant workforce that can often operate in precarious conditions. Laborers from South Asian countries are a key part of the region's economic engine, essential to the Gulf's prosperity. yet they remain among its most exposed and unprotected demographic. 3 people killed in the United Arab Emirates were nationals of Pakistan, Nepal, and Bangladesh who died because of Iranian drones that made it through the air defenses. Let me update you on some of the key military developments as of today. U.S. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth said a U.S. submarine sank an Iranian warship in international waters off the coast of Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka's Navy said it has recovered several bodies, but the toll is not yet clear. The vessel was transiting back to Iran following its participation in the International Fleet Review 2026 and the multilateral exercise Milan at Visakhapatnam, India. Preliminary reports suggest the frigate was targeted by a United States Navy submarine operating in the region. The ship issued a distress signal at dawn, prompting an immediate search and rescue operation. According to the Sri Lankan Ministry of Defense, the ship sank in the early morning before rescue forces reached the area. 32 crew members were rescued and transported to the Karapitia Teaching Hospital in Gao. However, over 100 personnel remain unaccounted for, with at least 78 reported wounded. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said Wednesday that the U.S. aims to completely eliminate Iran's navy. To that end, Leavitt claimed that the U.S. has destroyed more than 20 Iranian ships, including their top submarine. 3 U.S. Air Force Boeing F-15E Strike Eagle combat aircraft were shot down by Kuwaiti air defenses in a friendly fire incident on March 2nd, according to U.S. Central Command. The event involved 3 USAF aircraft flying in support of Operation Epic Fury. During active combat that included attacks from Iranian aircraft, ballistic missiles, and drones, the U.S. Air Force fighter jets were mistakenly shot down by Kuwaiti air defenses, according to the CENTCOM statement. The cause of the incident is under investigation. Friendly fire. That's always one of the tragic realities of war. Qatar also shot down 2 Iranian Su-24 bombers, making it the first nation to shoot down an Iranian aircraft in the conflict. NATO air defense systems shot down an Iranian missile that was traveling towards Turkey's airspace, the Turkish presidency said. This is believed to be the first time NATO forces have intercepted an Iranian missile traveling toward a member country's airspace since the conflict broke out. This conflict is spreading rapidly. Now let's shift gears and talk about what this means for your wallet, because the economic consequences are staggering. The U.S.-Israeli military strikes on Iran and Iran's subsequent retaliatory actions have had global and regional economic consequences. The conflict led to immediate surges in oil and gas prices, widespread disruptions in aviation and tourism, declines in stock markets, and heightened volatility in financial markets. Analysts projected potential global inflation increases and risks of recession if disruptions persist, particularly through closures of key shipping routes like the Strait of Hormuz. The cost of hauling crude oil from the Middle East to China has soared to record levels as the U.S.-Israel war on Iran dramatically expands across the region. The benchmark freight rate for very large crude carriers used to ship 2 million barrels of oil from the Middle East to China climbed to over $423,000 per day, reflecting an increase of more than 94% from the previous session. This dramatic move comes as shipping traffic grinds to an effective halt in the strategically vital Strait of Hormuz, amid fears of prolonged disruption to global trade. Oil prices have surged amid the military conflict as Iran said it would close the Strait of Hormuz, a vital transit route for crude oil that ferries an average of 14.5 million barrels each day. The closure of the Strait by Iran is sending shock waves across global energy markets, with Asia expected to face maximum pain. A prolonged closure would likely lead to a further surge in oil prices, with some analysts seeing oil crossing $100 per barrel. About 20% of global liquefied natural gas exports that come from the Gulf are also at risk. All right, everyone, that's the full picture as of today, March 5th, 2026. We are witnessing history unfold in real time. The assassination of a supreme leader, thousands of military strikes, global economic turmoil, regional nations being pulled into the conflict. As the U.S. and Israel execute joint strikes targeting Iranian military and institutional targets. Many cities have reportedly become ghost towns, as civilians fear going outside or going about their daily jobs. That's the reality on the ground right now. The State Department's Assistant Secretary for Consular Affairs wrote on X that Americans need to depart now from more than a dozen countries and territories in the Middle East because of the conflict. That was even as options to leave have narrowed, with flight cancellations and airport closures. Ultimately, the difference between an attack and a war often comes down to duration and intensity. As one professor of political science noted, Americans will call the situation an attack if it's brief, and a war if, as appears likely, it goes on for weeks and months. This story is developing by the hour. I'll be bringing you updates as new information comes in. If you found this video informative, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next update. Drop a comment below. Let me know your thoughts on this conflict. What do you think happens next? Stay safe out there, everyone, and I'll see you in the next one.